What is going on, everybody? I wanted to talk about Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment today. Do a kind of relaxed video, not much editing, not much really to talk about. I know there was a trailer that came out last week, and I was gonna try and do an analysis and a breakdown of it, but I kind of just felt like it was just a pretty standard trailer. There was some information released afterward online that I was like, ooh, that's really, really interesting, but I just didn't think it was kind of make a video about this territory, at least not a detailed one. So instead, I just wanted to give my final predictions, for Age of Imprisonment before it comes out, because we're really just a couple days away at this point, at least by the point that this video comes out. So yeah, I just wanted to go over things that I noticed in all of the trailers or in all of the marketing, and just, anything's fair game here, and try to make predictions, on the characters, on the story, on the world, the expectations, the impact of the Zelda timeline and all that stuff. So I'm just gonna get started with some of the stuff I was thinking about the last couple weeks. So one of the things I'm really curious about is, how is the world presented to us? Like in Age of Calamity, we had the Sheikah Slate map that we would use to navigate from mission to mission, or side quests, bonus content, all of that stuff. Do they reuse that? Do they do that all over again? I don't know. There doesn't seem to be any indication so far that that's what happens. It would certainly be the easier route for them to go, but it also just seems like, I'm saying this having played the demo at Best Buy last week, the game just kind of starts from there. There's no indication of where you would go to start the next mission from, or anything like that. So it doesn't seem like there's any of that type of, Age of Calamity type UI. It could literally just be the same thing. But I guess I and many others are kind of hoping that maybe the world will be the menu, and that you'll be able to kind of do that free roaming that we saw in some of the footage from the Tokyo Game Show and all that stuff, and maybe just, navigate around the world using that. I'm really excited to see what they do with that, because Age of Calamity was... It was great. I really loved Age of Calamity, but also at the same time, I wanted to explore those areas outside of a mission. And it seems like they're giving us a small amount of that in this game, because of the moments that aren't actually battles where you can do this free roaming movement. I'm really excited for those. I just wonder how integrated into the game and how many sections are like this in the game and in its story. So, from there, I'm really interested to find out what the full roster of this game is. I mean, we know certain characters. We know Zelda, Rauru, Minoru, Sonia, Agriston, Kia, Rafika, and Artie, the sages. We got the names of a couple more people that are playable. We got, Kalamo, the Korok, the construct that clearly is not supposed to be, but yet still supposed to be Link, is just called the Mysterious Construct for now. But we know some other names. We know that there's this Goron captain or lieutenant, I guess. His name in Japanese is Pastos, which may be translated in English as Paston. And we also know the name of the soldier from the big Warriors image with all the characters in it that's banging on the bell shield. His name is apparently Typhon. But I'm not really sure what those characters are really like. He uses a sword and shield, but is his playstyle kind of similar to Link? I'm really excited to find out more about him and a lot of others. I was wondering for a second if they were just customizable captain characters of every race, because we saw so many of them, and we saw this purple-haired warrior wearing the same Zonite armor that Link and some of the higher-ranking guards can wear. We saw a generic-looking Gerudo captain, Rito captain, an old Zora, and a young Zora who actually looks almost identical to Sidon, which I think is interesting. But I don't know how many other characters we can expect. I mean, it looks like there might be 2 side characters, captains per race if that's the case, that'll be great. I really hope they don't leave any of these characters in the non-playable limbo, because that would really kind of suck. I don't think Linalia will be playable, just because I honestly can't imagine a moveset for her, but they've done it before, like Agatha and Hyrule Warriors, or Hestu and the Great Fairies and Age of Calamity, where characters that you don't think you'd be able to play as, or you don't think would make sense to play as, you absolutely can still play as them. I wonder if there's going to be like other characters like the King Zora, or elders of each race or something like that. And I do expect Ganondorf, Kawume, and Kotake to be playable. There was actually a clip that was released on the website where you can see Rauru battling the miasma pose, which are actually, I guess, spoiler if you haven't played the demo and gotten all the way, past the sacred power point. Those things are called shades. Those miasmas pose, when you defeat them, they turn into pose, so they must really be related to pose heavily, but they're called shades, the evil ones, and these are the same spirits that Rauru and Sonia seal away in the Shrines of Light, that kind of stuff. So but the point is that Rauru was playable. He was fighting, and he was fighting these shades, and Kawume and Kotake were there. And the interesting thing about it, Kawume and Kotake were in the line of his attack, or I think it was actually just Kotake, was in the line of the attack, and didn't take any damage or knockback from it. And I mistook that for happening at first, because she jumps back, but it looked like she was just dodging the attack of one of the shades. And so that really got me excited, because it was like, are they going to be like ally characters, and Ganondorf's going to be like an ally character before he betrays Hyrule? Because, I mean, he did swear fealty, so this show of fealty can't just be one and done, and then he goes away, and they never see him again. It's quite likely, at least in my opinion, that Ganondorf will play the part of a good guy. He'll pretend to be a good guy for a certain amount of time, so I'm really, really interested to see stuff like that. And I just wonder where they're going to go with Ganondorf in this game, because in the original Hyrule Warriors, he was playable in the actual story sections. Of course, he was, unabashedly evil in that. But in this game, they might give us a chance to play as Ganondorf while being technically allied with the good side. So I want to see more stuff like that. But Calamity Ganon in Age of Calamity was just a bonus character. You couldn't play as him in any story missions. You unlocked him after the story is done. And obviously that's reasonable. Ganondorf is a kind of a different animal to try and build a game around than Calamity Ganon. Calamity Ganon is literally an unabashedly evil threat that you cannot pretend is a good guy, whereas Ganondorf can at least play the part of pretending to be on the side of the good guys for a short amount of time. There's also things about the world that I want to see, like, aside from just, the exploration aspect of how much do we get to explore, there's things that relate to lore. Like we see in, I think, 2 of the trailers, there are ruins from Hylia's era before Skyward Sword, which, again, I will forever maintain until the Zelda development team actively says otherwise, that this is the true founding of Hyrule. And yes, there are discrepancies, because there have always been discrepancies with Zelda games. Like, Ocarina of Time didn't match up with A Link to the Past backstory. Skyward Sword doesn't really match any of the descriptions of the Master Sword's creation from, like, Wind Waker or Twilight Princess, and it kind of matches A Link to the Past, but still, again, none of that stuff was actually detailed. So I kind of just take the Fujibayashi approach, where he said, we're not trying to fix history, we're just trying to make new discoveries in the Zelda timeline. That's how they approach it. So yes, there are discrepancies in Rauru being the founding king of Hyrule, but I just think there's so many more discrepancies in calling him the first king of a refounded Hyrule, because then they have to forget everything about the past Hyrule to think he's the first king. And yet every bit of information in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom points to the fact that all the other games still did happen, and they know about these events. They know about Ocarina of Time. But, side tangent aside, the Hylia era ruins in Age of Imprisonment are so stand out, because they're the only ruins that you can really see, I think, so far. Like, there are a lot of wooden buildings that I've seen from the footage of Age of Imprisonment, which is kind of like what you would expect from an early developing civilization. But the only other buildings that aren't Zonai in origin seem to be from Hylia's era, and that makes sense if this is before Minish Cap and after Skyward Sword. Now, some people still saying it's, before Skyward Sword, and that could be a possibility. I mean, Fujibayashi did actually say both answers could be true when asked, does Tears of the Kingdom's backstory take place before Skyward Sword or after? He said both answers could be true. So I don't know why that part got ignored by, the refounding, believers. And, if you're a refounding believer, good for you. I just don't think that is the philosophy under which they are developing this game's story. Because they called this Ganondorf the original Ganondorf. All the sages' names are basically the oldest thing in their category. I will, put an image up that will actually show the breakdown of all of their names. But, literally, oldest rock, oldest bird, oldest fish-like vertebrate, oldest hominid. And then Kalamo's name. It literally means Kalamophyton, which is the oldest forest in the fossil record. All of those things are really meant to grab your attention and make you think about this. They call Ganondorf the original Ganondorf. They say Sonia was designed as the ancestor of all Princess Zeldas. I mean, all of that stuff really does add up when you put it together. And I just think it's harder to say the refounding is the best answer when the true founding works. I mean, all of this works with some amount of discrepancy. There's discrepancies in the refounding theory too. It's just, I guess, what you're willing to put up with. But I want to see more ruins and see what was named what at that time, because we have Mount Naburu, we have Mount Ruta, we have Lake Darunia, we have all these things that are named after characters from Ocarina of Time. We have plenty of places named after plenty of characters, and it would be really, really cool to see that they change the names of certain places to reflect whatever timeline location this is supposed to be in. What if all of the Skyward Sword names were still there, Gorko, Golo, and Gortrim from Skyward Sword, the three Gorons? What if their names were still in the Elden region, but Darunia's name and I think Darmani and Gorkoron, they're not there. The Goron Mount Rushmore isn't there, but the stuff from Skyward Sword is. So that would be a really, really interesting thing to see. So I really am hoping that they will let us see the names of certain locations on the map. And that way we can kind of map this out accordingly. I want to see what the Faron Woods was like prior to the Zonai ruins being constructed, because the Zonai ruins we've seen since Breath of the Wild are actually made by those who admired the Zonai in the future. So same with the Typhlo ruins. These aren't actually made by the Zonai from Raru's ancestry. These were made long, long after. So I wonder what the Faron Woods actually looks like in the past compared to the present. There's the Gerudo Desert, which, I mean, it may not seem like a big deal, but it was Dream Shrine who pointed out in her analysis video, the Gerudo Desert doesn't seem to just be locked to the same region that we saw in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. It actually seems like the Gerudo Desert extends much, much further north and a little bit east towards the Breach of Demise, because there's a shot that was in that analysis video. I have it linked in one of my videos. I'll probably just link it again in this one so you can find that one quickly. But it shows that very clearly from perspective and the geography, the types of the rocks that are around, that this is clearly the Breach of Demise, where this Gerudo settlement is actually held. And I'm so interested to see more of that, because that's that's the kind of stuff that really changes up the way we see Tears of the Kingdom's past. The world isn't identical to the way it is in the present. There are a lot of big distinctive changes in the topography and the landscape and the locations of certain groups. So I want to see more of that. Tanagar Canyon, obviously, which leads to the Forgotten Temple, which was back then called Sonia's Temple, or rather, Temple of Sonia. All we know is that Masterworks and Princess Zelda in the Switch 2 voice memory said that the temple was named after the first queen of Hyrule. So likely this is going to be called Temple of Sonia or Sonia's Temple or something like that. And I want to see what it looks like, because the Masterworks book also says the goddess statues are the oldest structures in Hyrule, and it is believed that the temples are built around them. But there's a problem with that, because in the Sage's Vow memory in Tears of the Kingdom, where the sages are standing when they say the last free village of Gerudo Desert has fallen, that's exactly where the mother goddess statue of Hylia is supposed to be. And that's really, really concerning, because the mother goddess statue is the oldest statue, according to Breath of the Wild's lore. And all the statues are supposed to be the oldest structures in Hyrule, and the temples were built around them, so where is the mother goddess statue? Now, this may give credence to the idea that this is a pre-founding, before Skyward Sword. I don't know, maybe the statue is just in another part of the temple, but either way, I'm really excited to see the full design of the ancient Forgotten Temple and what it looked like, as well as the Great Plateau. I don't even know if it was called the Great Plateau then, but according to the lore book, the home of the Zonai was an actual sky island that they descended on. It was the original Great Sky Island before the one Zelda sent up, and they descended on it and made revolutions down from the sky and all that stuff and landed on their hometown. And it is believed that the Great Plateau is the Zonai capital city that descended from the heavens, because the exterior during the past is built with Zonai, Zonai architecture. So it's believed that this was actually once a giant Zonai Sky Island capital city that they lived on, and that Raru's ancestors descended on this plateau. This also makes it much more significant why Raru would even found his kingdom here. It's because that's where his people hailed from, basically. I think the last place I'd like to really like to get a full view of, I mean, we got all of the hometowns of every Gerudo that are worth looking into, but the ancient Zora home, I'm sure it spanned all the way from the Water Temple to the ancient Zora Waterworks, but I just want to see more of how they functioned in this world. What was the Zora kingdom like? If Kia really is the Zora queen, as the English version suggests. I mean, the Japanese version does seem to use the term princess, so I don't know. I don't know if Nintendo of America is taking too many liberties there or not. I hope not, because that'll create a lot of confusion. But otherwise, if she really is the queen of the Zora, then I would like to see, is there a King Zora, I forget his name, the annoying one from Ocarina of Time, who wouldn't get out of the way. But yeah, if there was a King Zora at that time, and does he survive the Imprisoning War? Because according to Minoru and Masterworks, there were a lot of casualties during this war. And so while Zelda and the 6 sages survived, not Minoru, that doesn't mean that everybody but Rauru, Minoru, and Sonia die. Everybody but Rauru, Minoru, and Sonia survive the war. I'm sure there were plenty of casualties of characters we're going to get attached to. I mean, who knows? All of the captain warrior characters that we saw, they could all perish in the Imprisoning War. So it's going to be very interesting just to see, their daily lives and their, their structures of their domains, their kingdoms, all that stuff. I really hope that this game shows all that. Another thing I wanted to look into, I wanted to make a full prediction for what I think is going to happen in the story, the entire sequence of events of the canon version of the story. I'll talk about an alternate version of the story after this, but for this game is canon version of the story, I want to just kind of lay out how I think things are going to go with a couple of caveats. I don't think in the canon version of the story that they are going to have Link from the future in Breath of the Wild be playable. But I do believe that Link and the future sages will be bonus characters of some degree, and I'll explain why in a bit, but first I'll go through, my predictions for the story. So I think the game actually opens up with Link and Zelda under Hyrule Castle. Probably right after the mural room, where they, saw all the events of the Imprisoning War, or some of the events of the Imprisoning War. And I think it's just going to be that free roaming type of movement that we saw in a lot of the showcases so far. And they're just going to be walking until they get to Ganondorf. He wakes up, same as Tears of the Kingdom, but we see it from, slightly different camera angles. Zelda travels to the past, and then that's where she meets Rauru and Sonia. From there, they head to the castle, just like they said they wanted to do, but they are intercepted by the Shades, the Miasma Pose. And this is where we see them put down a Shrine of Light after this mission. And then they, the story proceeds from there. Zelda meets Minoru, and then we get to this chapter 2, I guess. Not even chapter 2, mission 2. Because when I played the demo, I noticed this, and other people have noticed this in their footage. Zelda's only level 4 in this demo. And that pretty much solidifies that this is the second mission in the game. I think it's so interesting that they didn't want it to be the first mission of the game that was in the demo, but the second mission. I guess the first mission really shows a lot more stuff happening, and so they wanted to make sure to have a smaller, less interrupted gameplay experience. So, but either way, this is most likely the second mission of the game where they go underground and they're trying to find these sacred sites. And I can't remember who it was that I will link the person below who found this, but in their analysis of the footage, they found that the room where the hero construct, the mysterious construct, is apparently sealed within. You can see it in the second level. So that means we might be playing as this hero construct very early on in the game. So from there, I think you'll just go on to, meet all of the sages and other important side characters in their missions, kind of like when we meet the champions in Age of Calamity. Then we get a mission around the Molduga Assault. So they'll probably, extend this whole thing to match up with a gameplay experience, so we actually have a battle then, but it will still basically be the same memory where a bunch of Molduga attack and Rauru blast them away. From there, I think we're going to get a Ganondorf mission, where we do something as Ganondorf just to kind of really introduce us to him in the standpoint of this game, instead of just, what we know from Tears of the Kingdom. And then that's when the Show of Fealty will happen, where Ganondorf bows before Rauru. We'll get missions after this, maybe 1 or 2 missions with Ganondorf, Kuume, and Katake being allies of the Kingdom of Hyrule. And I think that's going to be great. Of course, I mentioned earlier the website video, all of that stuff, where Kuume was not damaged, or Katake was not damaged by Rauru's attack, even though being in the line of the attack. So I think they are going to be allies for a certain portion of this game. Then Ganondorf might do something to show his hand. He might overstep, something like that causes them to be more than just a little suspicious of him, but they know he's a problem. Because when Sonia says you are a puppet of Ganondorf to the puppet Zelda, it's this isn't even a question at this point that Ganondorf is not an ally of the Kingdom of Hyrule. Now they could have just been, doing that for our benefit because we already know that, but maybe Ganondorf will do something that causes Hyrule to go, okay, you're done. And so then this is when the Puppet Zelda arc begins. So maybe 1 or 2 missions with Puppet Zelda being the antagonist. And then it culminates with, Ganondorf killing Sonia, birth of the Demon King, all of that. This is where a mission I talked about in my first Age of Imprisonment video, the 5 things I want to see from this game, where they flee to Tanagar Canyon to get to Sonia's temple. I think in this mission, there will be some aspect of either staying ahead of the Demon King because he's pursuing you, or perhaps getting there before Sonia dies. Maybe they hope getting to Sonia's temple will bring her back to life or something, or prevent her from dying. So we know Sonia isn't buried immediately upon getting there, or we can expect that because the memory where we actually see Sonia's grave is there's some time between that and the birth of the Demon King memory. So it's possible Sonia was still alive for a bit of this, and I'm really, really excited to see that. And hopefully we'll even get to see what her funeral service was. I actually think that the song from the second trailer, where you can actually hear the Ballad of the Goddess playing, or at least one of the motifs from the Ballad of the Goddess. I think that might be the funeral song, because it's a very somber sounding song, and then there's the sort of lifting up motif of the Ballad of the Goddess, and that might be like them sending her off into the afterlife or something like that. So that'll be interesting to see. From there, I think we'll get, an actual mission of the Demon King's March, which may be what it's called in the original Hyrule Warriors, where we play as Demon King Ganondorf and his allies as they, ransack Gerudo Desert, because, they tore that place up in that Demon King's army memory. So I expect to play as Ganondorf, obviously in his Demon King form at some point, because who wouldn't want to play as, one of the coolest designs for Ganondorf we got. After Sonia's funeral, I think that we'll see like the Sage's Vow, same way we saw it in Tears of the Kingdom, and then they'll go and reclaim all of their areas from monsters before heading to the Great Plateau to reclaim the ancient Hyrule Castle. Then from there, Ganondorf will show up and they'll be trying to taunt him, provoke him into following Rauru into the depths, because as we've seen from the demo of Age of Imprisonment, Zelda and Rauru's powers actually get stronger at sacred sites. And the sacred site that they end up fighting the final battle in is supposedly the Temple of Light from Legend. And so Rauru's power will get a boost here, Zelda's power will get a boost here. So I guess they're thinking if we can get him to one of these sacred sites, we can have a better chance at fighting Ganondorf. They did not have a better chance at fighting Ganondorf, but at least Rauru got to seal him. So that'll be where the final battle happens, just like in Age of Calamity where Seal popped up when you were about to defeat Calamity Ganon. I think Imprison will pop up here. That's probably what we should expect. But I don't know that that's going to be the end of the game. The reason I say that is because there's apparently some time difference between the end of the Imprisoning War and when Zelda draconifies in the past. Because it's not just that the Master Sword needs to show up, but it's also that Zelda and the sages had to make preparations. Minoru made preparations for Link in the future. This included sending, the Great Sky Island up, but it was a lot of other things too that actually had to happen. Zelda actually had to travel to all of the sages' hometowns. And so I could see a scenario where there are quite a few missions after Ganondorf is imprisoned where you still have to do things. Because his power was still leaking out even after Rauru initially sealed him. This is why the purification unit was added to help Rauru in his seal, because it was thought that, Ganondorf's power would leak into the area and destroy Rauru's body, so they added some extra, components to the seal to help filter out Ganondorf's miasma. So I'm really wondering how they're going to handle that preparation time between the Imprisoning War and Zelda draconifying. I have a thought that the Construct, Hero, and Kalamo are actually only a part of that story. And the reason I say that is because we've seen quite a few shots with them, quite a few screenshots, a lot of things with them so far, and none of them overlap any of the sages or Rauru or even Minoru or anybody. And it's that's really interesting. That not a single shot with Kalamo or what am I trying to say? The Hero Construct seems to overlap the same time period as, Zelda and the Sages, prior to the Imprisoning War. So it's entirely possible that they only show up after, because you got to remember the Construct was introduced in that second trailer with Fi's theme playing, and Fi's theme only plays a couple of times in Tears of the Kingdom, but it's always around the Master Sword and its, return through time, or its revitalization in the Light Dragon's head. It's always around that. So if they're playing Fi's theme with this hero, then I think it's possible that maybe the Construct body could have existed prior to the Imprisoning War, as we saw in that second level. But what if the hero, the soul of the hero, actually doesn't even take part in any of the battles until after the seal. And so all of this stuff that we've seen with the Construct Hero and with the Korok Kalamo, all of that is from the time Rauru sealed Ganondorf until the time Zelda Draconifies. Now, I think there was something that made it harder to, figure out for sure, which is the only shot of Zelda interacting with them, I believe, is you see her arm extending forward like she recognizes the hero, but we can't see all of her to be able to tell when this happens in the story. So before the Imprisoning War, all of the sages, including Zelda, their clothes were, fine. They were pristine. They weren't messed up or anything. But after the Imprisoning War, whether it's when Zelda goes to visit them or before she Draconifies, all of their clothes are messed up from that final battle. Like, they're scruffed, they're dirty, all that stuff, they're grimy. And so we couldn't see Zelda fully in that shot to be able to tell, is this prior to the Imprisoning War or after the Imprisoning War? So there's really no way for us to know when these two show up just yet. But I'm of the opinion, or slowly becoming of the opinion, that the Construct and Kalamo actually don't show up until after Ganondorf is sealed. And so there may be a lot more game to play after that sealing. And so is there going to be a final battle where we don't fight Ganondorf, but maybe we fight Kawume and Katake or something? That's interesting for me to just think about. Maybe we don't fight Kawume and Katake, but maybe Kawume and Katake work on their first calamity, because I'm thoroughly convinced that Kawume and Katake we see in Tears of the Kingdom are literally the same individuals from Ocarina of Time. I mean, their sashes literally have their names in the same script, and that script is from the Unified Timeline. So I'm not going to divulge all this stuff because I have a Founding of Hyrule video series coming out. Once Age of Imprisonment's done, I'll have all the information I think I need. I just want to make sure if Age of Imprisonment has, extra details, I don't want to have to make a follow-up video. So I'm just waiting till that game comes out to finish that series. But if you look throughout the Zelda timeline, the language that existed from Minish Cap all the way to Ocarina of Time actually changes after Ocarina of Time in every timeline. Obviously, you got the Book of Madura in A Link to the Past, because they speak a different language in that future. You've got the Wind Waker, where all of the ancients speak this same script that you can find in Minish Cap. You can find it in Ocarina of Time. You can find it in the Kakariko Graveyard in Twilight Princess, which is, again, from that time period. The ancients, the Great Deku Tree, Jabun, Volu, they all speak this language. And so Kawume and Katake having their names written in this language on their sashes, as well as on Ganondorf's Demon King Spear, that pretty much confirms that they're in the Unified Timeline. So this is the true founding of Hyrule. Again, I will go into much more detail on this in the Founding series, but I'm positive this Kawume and Katake are the same one from Ocarina of Time, just a lot younger. And so maybe the final battle of this game will be like their first attempt at resurrecting or cloning or something Ganondorf, like a phantom, a calamity, something like that. And so that will be the final thing we face before the game ends. So, I mean, maybe they won't go that route at all, but it kind of seems like the Kawume and Katake thing is so on the nose of a reference that they want you to think this is them when they were younger. So now that I've talked about what I think is going to happen in the canon story, I want to talk about predictions for like an alternate story, whether it's considered non-canon or not. I don't really care about if the alternate story is canon or not, like if it leads to another timeline branch. But I have said multiple times that I think that the possibility of an alternate story is high, because, I mean, obviously this is a game where we've already experienced the story. Like, we really have. Like, we've, not like in the details, but in the large scale view. We've seen so much of this game's important moments. Sonia's death, Rauru's sacrifice, Zelda's Draconification. Those aren't going to be new moments, so I've suggested from the beginning we'll get two stories. The canon story to fill in the blanks of Tears of the Kingdom, and a new story that we don't know what's going to happen in that story. And then the creator's voice came out in May, And they said this game not only tells the story of the imprisoning war, but of the player's own story to save Hyrule. And I was like, okay, well, does that mean that there's an alternate story here? And it's like, maybe that's what they meant, maybe not. But then there's also the file size of the game. It's like huge. It's like 43 gigabytes. Like, that's a big change from Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, which was 11 gigabytes. And I've seen people say, you know, oh, it's a 4K 120 FPS or 4K 60 FPS, not 120. 4K 60 FPS game. Of course, the file size is bigger. And it's like, I actually develop video games for a living. Your resolution of your game and your frame rate isn't going to affect the file size. Like, when I lock my games to 30 FPS, they don't become smaller games. Like, that's not how that works. Your performance isn't handled by the amount of disk space you have on a drive. Not in that way. And so, yeah, maybe some other aspects of it, like higher polygon models, higher detail maps, audio files, video files, texture files, that can take up your space. But people seem to be under the impression that this game has 4K textures. And I'm sorry, but I've combed through these trailers. There's no reason to have 4K textures on the characters if you've seen how they're built. And a lot of the textures still look kind of smudged like they do in Tears of the Kingdom, which is fine. I mean, I'm not complaining about that. But all I'm saying is, I don't think this game has much higher resolution assets. The only thing I can think of are audio files, which that didn't make the game a super huge game on the Switch 1. I don't know why it would have to be so much higher quality audio on the Switch 2. I mean, compressing audio is a necessity of packaging and sending out a game. Like, you do not want a bunch of really, really memory-heavy audio files. And of course, if they have 4K video cutscenes, then of course that's going to take up a lot of space too. But something else to consider is Age of Calamity had a lot of dynamic cutscenes. These weren't pre-rendered all the time because your loadout might change, Link's outfit might change, your weapon choice might change, and that stuff was reflected in cutscenes oftentimes. And so the cutscenes actually aren't going to take up a bunch of video file space if they're rendered dynamically in the game's engine. Now, there will be some pre-rendered cutscenes, I'm sure, whether it's a lot of effects that are on the screen that would tank the performance, or stuff where you can't change the character's loadout. We'll see that just like we saw in Age of Calamity. But I'm pretty sure the vast majority of the cutscenes in Age of Calamity were indeed dynamic in engine. So the game is actually playing these cutscenes out. So if that's the case, then I don't think file sizes for audio and video are a good enough reason to say that this is 43 gigabytes. I mean, this game is bigger than Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom's Switch 2 editions combined. Like, that's a large game. Like, that is a large game. Actually, I think that was when we thought it was 44 gigabytes. If it's 43, then it's not bigger than them combined, but it's almost the same size as them combined. Like, I can't see a way that is just, you know, audio files and video files. Or even just texture files, which the textures look too muddy to be 4K to me. And again, I'm not saying the textures look bad, but if you zoom in on some details, you can see they're not as detailed as some people are saying that they are. So all that aside, I'm saying I think that the game has a lot more to it that they have not shown us, whether that is being able to roam around the map, whether that is multiple story pathways, so they need a lot more files for these story pathways. I don't know. I believe Dynasty Warriors 8 had multiple path stories that you could choose based on your decisions. But either way, I just don't see a way that this is almost 44 gigabytes without, a good reason. Because maybe it's not Nintendo who's compressing it, but at the same time, these aren't exactly amateur game devs here. So I've been wondering about an alternate story for a very long time. It was in my literal second video on this game, like back in April when I first uploaded videos about this game. So I think that there's going to be plenty of content, whether it divulges into alternate stories or not. I think that is certainly something to be considered just from all the things that we've heard so far. Now, the final thing I want to touch on is I think that this game will obviously have impact on the timeline debate. Because they've said so much so far that just is like trying to hammer home that this is the founding of the Kingdom of Hyrule. Like, this is a really old time in Hyrule's history. And I think that there's going to be some like details that are just going to be kind of like offhanded, but they're going to be references for, the astute player to pick up on. Like, I could very easily imagine a scenario where Rauru and Sonia suggest that the history of the land was that it wasn't a kingdom that had fallen before or anything like that, but rather like something like the goddess and her chosen hero slaying a demon in the past, like just some offhanded comment like that, and it'll be like, oh, so the last thing they know of historically was the events of Skyward Sword. And like something like the Temple of Sonia will be stated to have been built by the goddess herself. And while that could be, interpreted a lot of ways, I would work off of the opinion that the Temple of Sonia, because it says this in the Masterworks book, that one of the reasons they went to that temple to get away from Ganondorf was because it was considered territory the Demon King couldn't get to. Like, that it was under divine protection of Hylia. Okay, so if it's under divine protection of Hylia, it would make sense to say that the temple was built by the goddess herself. Okay, but there is a temple like this in Skyward Sword. It is the Temple of Hylia. But the Temple of Hylia's location doesn't match up with the Forgotten Temple. Like, it matches up more with the Temple of Time. So, when did Hylia make this temple? Was it prior to Skyward Sword? Or is this a classic case of the conflation, where Zelda in Skyward Sword does something, and those actions are called the goddess? So, like, when they say the princess who has the blood of the goddess, they're not talking about actual Hylia from before Skyward Sword. They're talking about Skyward Sword Zelda. But because that was the most important detail about her that was remembered, they just call her the goddess, because she is the goddess reborn. This literally happens in Skyward Sword, where Zelda hands her sailcloth to Link and says, the goddess gave a sailcloth like this to her chosen hero long ago, but this isn't the same one, obviously. And it's like, no, actually it is, because Link and Zelda travel back into the past, and the legend of the chosen hero is actually passed on to them, I think intentionally, to kind of cause this stuff to happen, by their events in the past. Their actions in the past lead to them doing this stuff in the present, so it's a loop. And so Zelda thinks the goddess Hylia did this herself, but it was literally just her doing it. And so I think that if they make a line to some action of the goddess, relatively recently in history, that it'll be a reference to Skyward Sword. I think that there is a line in the trailer where Rauru says something that sounds like it's an acknowledgement of the Triforce, because it works like the Secret Stones. And I think there's going to be some information that, Rauru sealed the Triforce away or something like that. And they may even say the word Triforce in this game, which I've never been too bothered by the fact that they didn't say Triforce in Breath of the Wild, because they don't say it in Twilight Princess either. It's really just dependent on how much people know about the Triforce. What's more important is the Triforce's properties, what happens with the Triforce in the game, rather than whether or not it's called the Triforce. So, Zelda's power literally has a Triforce symbol on her hand, so I'm just of the opinion it is the full Triforce. I also think that Kalamo, like many people, I think Kalamo is the Great Deku Tree. But unlike many people, I don't think he's the one from Breath of the Wild's era. I think he's the one that either becomes the one in Ocarina of Time, or one prior to him. And of course you might be saying to yourself, well, the Koroks didn't evolve until after Wind Waker. And again, I will talk about this in my founding video series, where I actually go over all of the details. I have a whole video on Koroks, a whole video on the Rito, the history of the Gerudo, all of that stuff. But there's a line from the Great Deku Tree in Wind Waker where he says, in the past, something along these lines, in the past, the Koroks took on human forms, but when they came to live on the sea, they took these shapes. Now, I don't think he's saying, when he says the Koroks took on these forms, that he's saying necessarily the Korok is the original form. But he is suggesting that the Kokiri is not their original form, that they had to take on the form of humans. And then when they came to live on the sea, they took these shapes. Now, this has been a long-standing theory in the Zelda community since long before Breath of the Wild. The Kokiri just look like human children so that Link will fit in Ocarina of Time. And some people also believe that the Kokiri look like Koroks as soon as they don't live in Kokiri Forest anymore. And so, you know, this is one of the things I will do. I promise I'll do a much deeper dive on this in that video series, because obviously the Koroks is a big point in the refounding argument, but it's not an impossible to argue against point, if that makes sense. Like, there are points that you can make where it's like, that's solid, you can't get around that, but the Koroks just are not that point. They are just not that point in the refounding argument. Like, Koroks, they're forest spirits. What physical shape they take actually isn't important, and they do refer to the Deku Tree as their father. So it wouldn't make sense for the Deku Tree to birth Hylian children, but it would make sense if he birthed plant children. So I just believe that the Korok is the original form of the Kokiri, and they only look like the Kokiri in Ocarina of Time because Link needed to fit in, or what the Deku Tree hoped would be fitting in, because he really didn't. The last point, obviously, I talked at length about Kuume and Katake and how I think that they're the original ones from Ocarina of Time, just younger. I do think there's going to be some kind of indication, maybe after Ganondorf is sealed, that they're going to try and resurrect him or bring him back or start fresh with someone else. And so I'd like to see some kind of indication of that, but I think that they're going to kind of drive that point home with Kuume and Katake. And one of the reasons that I think that this is going to happen, and why I'm going to stick with the position that this is the true founding of Hyrule, is that Zelda makes a lot of references to the Demon King in, like, the voice memories for Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but some of them just straight up do not match Demon King Ganondorf. Like, there's one where she says, this is the spring for the goddess Din, and belief in the goddess Din has fallen because power was seen as an attribute of the Demon King, and so people stopped believing in Din. And it's like, that really doesn't make sense if it's Tears of the Kingdom Ganondorf that she's referencing, because yes, he is physically powerful, but so are the heroes who have stopped him. So is the King of Hyrule who sealed him. So are the sages. So are the Sheikah. So are the divine beasts. Like, why would power become associated with the Demon King if it was just physical power? It wouldn't make a lot of sense. But what would make sense is if Ganondorf got the Triforce of Power, which comes from Din, and because of that, people began to regard Din in the same category as the Demon King. Because Ganondorf in Ocarina of Time is also a Demon King. I mean, literally, he's referred to as Demon King Ganon. Sometimes as Dark Beast Ganon, but Demon King Ganon is also his title. So, I think that with all that knowledge that in the future, they're referencing Ocarina of Time Ganondorf, but it's all become conflated together as the same individual as time moves on, that we're going to see Kuume and Katake, like, try to start this movement around resurrecting Ganondorf. And I actually think that this is what Aster's cult is in Age of Calamity. Like, we see in the DLC that it's not just Aster, it's an entire cult of individuals who worship Ganon. And the mind-blowing thing about this group, I've been talking about this with other theorists like Single Player, OG Oath Gaming, Larulian Historian. I've been talking with others about this kind of stuff, and it really doesn't make sense to me that they have the Gerudo symbol on their backs. Because in the present day of Breath of the Wild's world, even the queen of the Gerudo, Urbosa, does not know for a fact that Ganon was a Gerudo. She says it is written that Ganon once adopted the form of a Gerudo, and if that's true, that will make this victory all the more sweet, or something like that. And it's like, okay, so she doesn't even know for a fact that Ganon was once Ganondorf the Gerudo Man. And yet this cult that worships Ganon, they have the Gerudo symbol on their backs. So either they directly know that Ganondorf that Ganon was once Ganondorf the Gerudo, or Kawume and Katake started a cult around Ganon, and this has become the symbol of the cult, the Gerudo symbol. And so this is actually not, and for those of you who are going to say, well, Age of Calamity is not canon, so that doesn't even matter. In Breath of the Wild Switch 2 edition, the voice memories, Zelda actually talks about cultists who worship the Demon King. Like, so the idea that this death cult doesn't actually exist, that they're not actually canon, I don't buy that for a second. I mean, I think it was a single player who pointed this out to me. I think it's Onyx and Varen in the Oracle games have Gerudo symbols on them. And Kawume and Katake are the master plan behind resurrecting Ganon in that game. So it would make sense if Kawume and Katake of Tears of the Kingdom, once their original Ganondorf got sealed, that they decided to basically, we're going to figure out a way to either free him from the seal or create phantoms and calamities to do his bidding. And that Kawume and Katake of that game become the Kawume and Katake of Ocarina of Time. And then after those events, whether it's because they knew eventually they were going to die or something, they start a whole group of individuals who worship Ganon and plot his resurrection. And obviously the death cult comes to an end in Age of Calamity. We see, all of the members are killed by Calamity Ganon. And we don't see any evidence of those members in Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom in the future. But the fact that Zelda mentions them in the voice memories for Breath of the Wild, which is set 100 years before Breath of the Wild, the fact that Zelda mentions these cultists, I think, is the strongest indicator that they are, in fact, a group that aligns with the one we saw in Age of Calamity. And if that's the case, where did they get their Gerudo symbol from? I don't think it's common knowledge around Hyrule that Ganon was once a Gerudo. If it was, they probably would be pretty mean to the Gerudo. But whatever knowledge of it does survive seems to exist among the Gerudo chief, Urbosa, and among this death cult that has the Gerudo symbol on their back. So I'm really excited. Like, Kawume and Katake are one of the parts of this story that I'm really, really excited to, learn more about. And I'm glad that they showed them in a gameplay setting on the website. And I really, really hope that we get missions where we get to both be allied with them, play as them, but also missions where they are enemies. And I hope that they don't make the mistake of killing them off in the story, because although it's totally possible Kawume and Katake could resurrect, obviously they did it in the Oracle games. They had to. They had to have resurrected to still be alive in the Oracle games, unless, the Downfall timeline had a completely different set of events where Link never went to the Spirit Temple. But the point is, they could resurrect Kawume and Katake. They absolutely could. But I hope that they just make it easier on the story by leaving them alive and ambiguous as to what they're going to do next, but kind of in a way where we can go, oh, they're about to plot something. So yeah, those are kind of all my thoughts on what I expect to happen in Age of Imprisonment. I am crazy excited to see this, to play this game. I got my pre-order, I got my Switch 2, we're just a couple of days away. And I think that whatever they do in this game, I think it's going to change the way a lot of people look at Tears of the Kingdom story. Maybe for better or worse, depending on what your position on them is. But I also think that it's going to change the way we look at the timeline too. Because they've been treating it like the true founding of Hyrule. So if they continue doing that, I don't think they're going to mince words about the story content that they add into this game. And so I think, come Thursday, November 6th, we're going to have a very clear picture on the timeline of Tears of the Kingdom. Because, a lot of people who criticize Tears of the Kingdom story have pointed this out. The Zelda team did a workshop after the criticism for Tears of the Kingdom story about, how to present Zelda stories more effectively. And Echoes of Wisdom kind of falls into this category of let's try to make sure we convey stuff pretty clearly within the timeline. And so, obviously, Age of Imprisonment is the newest title in the series. So if they're still going ahead with this mindset of how do we convey this stuff more clearly after this workshop, then I would expect that the story of Age of Imprisonment isn't going to be as ambiguous on timeline placement as maybe people have suggested Tears of the Kingdoms is. So I fully expect we're going to get a lot of answers, and they may not be answers that people like. Especially, I don't think that refounding theorists are going to like the answers they get, and they may just, hand wave them as the game doesn't really matter. But I think we're going to get answers, and it's going to really change the way a lot of people think about this game. So, yeah, those are all my thoughts on what I expect for Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. I will be live streaming the game. I got to work out my schedule and just, make sure I know exactly what time to start streaming. But you will probably see a notification on the channel for when I plan to start streaming. And I hope you'll join me, because this is going to be a great ride. And I hope you'll enjoy it along with me. Or if you're not going to and you want to play the game yourself, I hope you have a good time with the game. So that's all for now, folks. Later.